When Attorney George is going out and trying to grow his business, he has to go out and sign big contracts to lease an office space with a personal guarantee that even if his business goes bankrupt, that his personal finances will guarantee the lease. So if he goes bankrupt, his business goes bankrupt, his life savings have to keep paying for the lease, otherwise he gets sued. He has to take certain risks in order to build this business. But if you work for Attorney George and the business goes bankrupt, well, you lose your job, but you don't have to keep paying back debts to the business. See, if Attorney George goes out and invests $500,000 of his own money to advertise and find more clients, that's his risk. But the employees don't have to pay him back if that doesn't work. And so when you go out and do anything risky, you have more potential upside, but it comes with risk. And with that risk, you get the higher potential return. And the return is the profit potential, but you don't get any of that profit unless you take some of the risk. And that's the difference between being the business owner versus just being an employee in the business. Attorney George built the business with risk. And the risk was, number one, his time. Then he invested his own money. And then, of course, he had all the contracts and everything he had to do in order to build the business. And if those failed, well, then he'd be the one that's on the hook. The second thing that you have to understand is leverage. And by leverage, I mean, what can you do beyond just you? Because Attorney George might only be able to bill out 40 hours of his own time. And if he was thinking, you know what, maybe if I really wanted to make more money, I could stop seeing my wife, I could stop seeing my kids, and I can work to bill out 60 hours of time. And that doesn't mean he's working 60 hours a week, because that's only the billable work. That means you have to do another 50, 60 hours of work to find that 60 billable hours of work. Because when you're an attorney, not every piece of work that you do is actually billable, because you have to work to find the client, you have to work to make sure the client is happy, you have to work to keep up with the research and keep learning the work. So there's a lot of work that's outside of the billable work that you have to do as well. But still, there's a limit to how many hours a week that you can work. But this is where leverage was, how can he hire more people to do work? That way he can get paid even when he's not working. But see why this is so difficult? Because if you can charge $500 an hour or $200 an hour or $50 an hour, it doesn't really matter. If you're paying somebody else to do it, that means you got to pay them a fee, and you only make a small percentage of that. Maybe you make 10, 15, 20%. So now, instead of you making $200 an hour, you're making 20, 30, 40 bucks an hour, which is a whole lot less than $200 an hour. And this is where it can be kind of scary, because why would you want to give somebody else all that money when you can keep the bulk of it for yourself and do the work yourself? And you also don't have to worry about trusting somebody else, because what if they do a bad job and they ruin your name? You can start to see where that's a little scary. But this is where leverage is all about. If you want to be able to really scale and grow, we'll talk about scale in a minute, but if you really want to be able to build bigger, you have to be able to leverage time. And that means for every hour in a day, how much can you produce? And there's only so many things that you can do. I mean, if you are an attorney, I mean, there's only so much work that you can do in an hour. I mean, there's only 1 hour worth of work. But if you have 10 attorneys, now you have 10 potential hours worth of work that can be done. If you have 100 attorneys, that's 100 potential hours worth of work within that same hour. So now the question is, how can you leverage whatever you have? And that could be time and that can be money. Because Attorney George kind of does both. He leverages money by paying other attorneys, and he leverages time by getting more out of that same time than if he was doing the work himself. But you can see how that's risky, because well, there's a cost you have to pay, and there's no guarantee that you're going to make any money, right? Risk comes with that as well, which comes with number 3, which is scale, which is how can you grow beyond you? How can you have unlimited potential, upside potential? Because there are some businesses that you can't really scale. If you were producing, I don't know, soap bars, and you were only doing them in your own basement, there's only so many soap bars that you can build and sell. Maybe you can hire a few people from your neighborhood to build soap bars, but after that, you might not be able to scale more, especially if you can't source more materials. But if you can move it to a manufacturing plant, and you can hire more people, and you can get more raw materials, now you can scale more, but you have to have that ability. We saw this big shift of businesses moving digital because of this sole factor here, scale. Because if you owned a storefront and you were selling soap, well, there's only so many people that can buy soap at one time. I mean, maybe you might have a long line out the door if you were really attractive, but I mean, there's only one person that can purchase from one register at a time. So you might be limited to a few sales a minute, if that. But now when you take it digital, The advantage here of scale is you can have 100 people buying in 1 minute. You can have 1,000 people buying in 1 minute, just depending on whatever the capacity is of your service. But now there's really no limit when you go digital because now you have that scaling potential. So now when you're thinking about how to do this, you want to think about scale as well. And this was one of the most difficult concepts for me to understand, because for me in the beginning, I started off in the event planning space. I was essentially hosting parties in college. It was an event planning company, but I was essentially just hosting parties. But the problem was I wasn't getting paid unless I was hosting a party. Not to mention the fact that I hated the industry because I wasn't into partying or drinking, but that's besides the point. If I wasn't hosting a party, I wasn't getting paid. There was no scale. So from there, I moved into real estate. I started investing in real estate. And then I realized I needed more money to invest in real estate because real estate is expensive. So I got my real estate salesperson's license and started doing that. But I realized, again, I got caught up in scale. There was only so much that I could do. Now, sure, maybe I could have grown more, but I didn't see the opportunity for me at that moment. So then I shifted online. I got into e-commerce. But then I realized for me that the e-commerce industry that I was in wasn't my passion, which is why I switched again into financial media. I started building briefs media. Now we have things like market briefs. You might have heard me talk about market briefs a lot on my channel. Market briefs is a free financial newsletter. But the reason why that fits this scale side, I'm going to focus just on the business side of that, is I don't write market briefs. I've helped coach the team on how we talk about certain financial topics, and we know what it should read like, but I don't have to read it. And well, we can send out market briefs to 5 people or 500,000 people or even more. I mean, there's no limit to how many people we can send it out to. So it gives us the opportunity to scale. And so this is where now, for me, as I build something, I look for this same thing as well. How can I build something that doesn't necessarily rely on me, that you can leverage more output within the same 60 minutes? How can you do something that can grow beyond you? Because ultimately, if you want to build a true business, if you really want to build something beyond you, you have to think about the ability of you stepping away. Because if you can't step away, you don't really have a business. You just created your own job. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you don't have an exit strategy. Because if you wanted to sell, what would you do? And this is where, if you ever wanted to stop for whatever reason, whether something happens bad or you just want to sell because you're done, well, you want to be able to think about how you can potentially step away. But that requires you to have something that you can step away from. And you want to have the scalable growth as well. If you enjoyed this clip and you want to continue your financial education journey, I have another video that I think you'll love. All you got to do is click that button right over there. And for those of you who want to stay up to date on the top finance and business news, you can join Market Briefs, my free financial newsletter, by clicking that button below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.